Alright, so the last topic we're going to talk about during week 2, part A, is function, arguments, and parameters. Now this I specifically waited to talk about after we talked about scope, because the idea of variable scope will come into play here. Alright, so let's talk about these two terms, arguments and parameters. Now something that I do want to point out is that these terms, arguments and parameters, they work together, but they're not exactly the same thing. It's actually kind of a common misnomer that people use to use these terms interchangeably, but arguments and parameters are two different things, though they do work together. So the idea behind arguments is sometimes it's useful to send data, so values, variables, that sort of stuff, to a function when you call it. And again, since variables defined inside of a function only really exist inside of that function, this is the way to sort of bypass that. This is the way to sort of send values into other functions. So the way you do that is values, when you make a function call, can be passed in as arguments. So values that are sent into a function when you call said function are called arguments. For a function to receive arguments, when you call that function, you have to include parameter variables when you define it. So again, there's two pieces to making a function work. There's the function definition, which is the def function name, blah blah blah, and then there's the function call. So the arguments go inside of the function call. The parameter variables, or more shortly known as just parameters, these go inside the function definition. So a parameter variable, or just parameter, is a special variable that is assigned the value of an argument when a function is called. And I know I'm saying the same words a lot over and over, sort of cyclical in their definitions, but like I said, they do work together. I promise it'll make more sense after we do an example. Alright, so here's an example. Here is a function definition. Def, show number, open close parentheses, and now we have this new thing inside the parentheses. Colon, and then some lines that are part of the function. So you can optionally include parameter variables when you create a function definition. So this function definition, it has one parameter variable. That parameter variable is number. So parameter variables are variables whose name you put inside of these parentheses when you make a function definition. It is optional to do this, but it makes your functions very powerful. So again, number is a parameter variable. Number will get its assignment, meaning it'll get the value. So number is the name of the variable. It does not have a value yet. It gets the value when you make a function call and you give an argument to that function call. So here's more of a full-fledged working program. I do recommend practicing typing this up, seeing what happens. I'm not going to run the code myself, but I do encourage you to type it up just for practice writing function definitions. So here's our program. Def main does this function call. Cool. Def show double, this is the same function that we just saw in the previous example slide. So again, number is a parameter variable. It is a variable whose value does not get assigned until you actually make a function call. So it does some stuff with the number, prints result, cool. Alright, then we call the main function. So this is when we're actually going to start running code. So we call main. We go up to the main function definition. Main says call show double. So this is a function call, right? Show double parentheses 5 parentheses. This is a function call to this other function that we wrote. Now inside this function call, you see that we wrote something inside of the parentheses, right? We wrote this number 5. So 5 is an argument. So whatever you write inside the parentheses for a function call, that is an argument. So it's similar to print, right? We call the function print. It's print and then some stuff in it. The stuff in it that's actually displayed on the screen, those are all arguments to print. So what happens is when we make this function call to show double, right here, when we make this function call, there's a variable assignment that happens when we hit these lines of code, and the assignment is this parameter variable, number, gets this value, 5, which is the argument to the function. So again, if we draw our little variable box diagram, here's the scope, right, and we're inside show double right now. And even though there isn't like an explicit assignment statement, there isn't a line of code that says number equals 5. When we make this function call, that's basically what's happening behind the scenes. That's why this is sort of a special variable. That's why it gets this name parameter variable, is because you don't give it a value via a normal assignment statement. You give it a value when you make this function call. So when this function call is made, this variable number gets the value 5. So number gets this value 5. Alright, and this next line, result equals number times 2. Alright, well that makes us another variable inside show double. And what are we going to put into it? Into it, we put in number, which is 5, times 2, which is 10, right? So we're going to put 10 in it. Cool. And then it prints result. So this will print the number 10. So again, this is a way that you can sort of pass values between different functions. It's a way you can sort of get past that local variable restriction. You use parameter variables inside the function definition, like number, and then when you make the call to the function, you pass in an argument inside the parentheses. Alright, so I recommend trying to figure out on paper what this program is going to do. So go ahead and take a couple minutes and run through that on paper. Pause this video, and then once you have your answers, come on back. So you should get this, right? So this program, it's using the same show double function that we had before, except in main it's calling it 3 different times. And each time it calls it with a different argument. Now this is the power of parameter variables, is even though I'm using the same exact function definition for show double, I can call that function as many times as I want with different arguments passed through. So that variable named number, that will be set equal to many different numbers, and the number that it's set equal to depends on whatever number is inside the parentheses when we make the function call. So the first time we call show double, the argument is 5. So number gets the value 5. So when you multiply that by 2, you're going to get 10. Second time we make the function call, the argument is 10. So number gets the value 10, which is how we get 20 as a result. That's 10 times 2. Third time we call the function, the argument is 144. So number gets the value 144. So then when we print result then, it'll then print 288. So functions are pretty powerful. They are a very sort of nifty trick you can use in your code to reuse the same code multiple times, but slightly differently, especially if you use a combination of parameter variables and different arguments each time you call the function. Alright, so again, a variable scope, this is hopefully a review, this is from the last video, a variable scope is the part of a program where the variable may be accessed. It's the part of the program where the variable lives. Outside of that part of the program, variable doesn't exist. So I sort of alluded to this earlier with that picture that I drew, but a parameter's variable scope, so again, a parameter variable is one of those variables like number who is inside of those parentheses when you define the function. So the scope of those parameter variables, those are local to the function that you use the parameter variable in. So the use of those parameter variables can only be used inside of the same function. So do keep that in mind. Parameter variable scope is local to the function where you use that parameter variable. Another cool thing to keep in mind is you can write a function with many parameter variables. So we've seen examples now of functions without any. We've seen an example of functions with one parameter variable, but you can write as many as you want. You can have as many parameter variables as you want. So if you have, for example, 2 parameter variables in your function definition, that means whenever you make a function call to it, you should give it 2 arguments. If you have 5 parameter variables, when you make a function call to that same function, you should give it 5 arguments. So the number of parameter variables in a function definition should match the number of arguments in the corresponding function call. So multiple arguments, they will be passed by position. So just make sure that, for example, if you want the first parameter variable to get the number 5, when you call that function, make sure the number 5 is the first value that you write inside of the parentheses. So it's passed by position. So the first argument will go to the first parameter variable. Second argument will go to the second parameter variable, and so on. And you separate them both with just commas. And you'll get some practice writing functions with multiple parameters in the lab assignment this week. Really quick though, here's an example of a program has 2 function definitions, right? Main, which is our standard main function. You'll note main has no parameter variables. Then the second function definition is show sum. So this time show sum has 2 parameter variables, num1 and num2. So whenever I then call show sum, which you can see I do inside main, I do it on the 4th line in main, I call show sum, you need to give it 2 arguments. So I recommend working this out by hand. What is this program going to display when I run it? And then type it up, run the code, and verify to make sure you get the same answer. If you have any questions about it though, please let me know, post to the forum, send me an email, let me know. Alright, and then here are 2 last practice examples for this video. There are many more practice examples posted on Canvas. I recommend at this point pausing the video and running through each one of these programs by hand, determining what is going to be displayed when I run these 2 different programs. Use those variable box drawing diagrams to help you out. So go ahead, try it out by hand, pause the video. Once you have some results, go ahead and come on back and I will show you the answers. Alright, so this first program here will display 65. Running through it really quick. So val equals 50, that is a global variable because it is defined outside of function definitions. And then we have a function definition for main, function definition for f1, and then we call the main function. So we call the main function, now we start to actually run code. Inside main, there is a function called f1. This function called f1 has 1 argument, which is val. which is 50. So then when we call f1, that parameter variable num gets the value 50. Val is 15, and then you print num plus val, which is 50 plus 15, you get 65. That's the first one. Running through the second one here, you should get 90. So again, we have a global variable val, a main function definition for f1, then we have a call to main. So when we call main, first line of code in main says val is now 40. Alright, so val is a local variable. So now when I call f1 with the argument val, that argument now is going to be 40, not 50, because remember, variable scope, you look locally, then you look globally. And since val does have a local value, 40, we're going to use that value. So now we call f1 with the argument 40. So that means num, which is the parameter variable, gets that value 40. So num is 40. Inside f1, we do print num plus val. Num is 40. Val, first we check locally. Is there val locally? No, there is no variable named val inside of f1. So then we check globally. Is there a variable named val globally? Yes. That value is 50. So it's 40 plus 50. So that prints 90. We go back to main. There's one more line of code. Val equals 10. Cool, but that doesn't really do anything. That doesn't change our output. So the code on the right will display 90. If you have any questions about either of these program run-throughs, please do post the discussion forums or let me know. Again, I highly encourage you to sort of write your own code and test yourself, just like I have done with these two examples. And there are more examples posted on Canvas as well, so make sure you run through those too.